I remember the day my first child was born. It was not in a gleaming hospital filled with the latest technology. No, it was in a small, under-equipped clinic. The generator sputtered, threatening to die with every contraction that racked my body. The midwife, a kind woman with tired eyes, did her best with limited supplies. I recall the fear, a cold knot in my stomach, not just for myself, but for the fragile life I was bringing into this world. This experience, etched into my very soul, is the reality for too many African women. It is a stark reminder of the promises unfulfilled, the resources diverted, and the lives deemed less important. Decades have passed since many of our nations gained independence. We celebrated, we dreamed, we envisioned a future where every child would have access to good healthcare, quality education, and a life of dignity. My mother, too, held these hopes when she was a young woman. She believed that her daughters would inherit a better world, a continent rising. Yet, when I look around today, 2025, and compare it to the stories she told, the progress feels agonizingly slow, almost stagnant in areas that matter most. The clinic where my child was born is perhaps only marginally better than the one where I was born. This is not the legacy we were promised. The echoes of those early independence speeches still linger, promising prosperity and equality. But for the women of Africa, these words often ring hollow. We are the backbone of our communities, the tillers of the land, the nurturers of families, the engines of informal economies. Yet our most basic needs, like safe childbirth facilities, are treated as luxuries rather than fundamental rights. The disparity between the rhetoric of progress and the lived reality of millions of women is a chasm that grows wider with each passing year. This is the weight we carry, the weight of a mother's hope deferred. We see grand projects, new highways, and glittering buildings in our capitals. These are paraded as signs of development. But what is development if a mother cannot safely deliver her child? What is progress if a young girl cannot access education because of lack of sanitation or safety? The true measure of a nation's advancement lies not in its towering structures, but in the well-being of its most vulnerable citizens. It is time to shift the focus, to acknowledge that the health and empowerment of women are not secondary concerns, but the very foundation of a thriving society. Our personal stories of struggle are not isolated incidents. They are indictments of a system that has failed us. Election seasons arrive with a whirlwind of activity and a torrent of promises. Suddenly, women's empowerment becomes the favorite buzzword on every politician's lips. We see our faces plastered on campaign posters, our concerns seemingly addressed in eloquent speeches. We are told that this time things will be different. This time our voices will be heard. This time our contributions will be valued. Hope, a fragile yet persistent bird, begins to flutter in our hearts. We line up for hours under the scorching sun, our thumbs stained with indelible ink, believing that our vote will usher in an era of genuine change and opportunity. But once the dust settles and the officials are sworn in, the promises often fade like morning mist. The commitments to gender quotas, to funding for women's health, to support for female entrepreneurs are relegated to the bottom of the agenda, if they feature at all. Empowerment becomes a tool, a carefully crafted phrase to garner votes and international approval, rather than a genuine commitment to dismantling the systemic barriers that hold women back. We see a few token appointments, celebrated with much fanfare, but the deep-rooted patriarchal structures that govern our political and economic landscapes remain largely untouched. This cycle of raised hopes followed by profound disappointment is a familiar and painful one. The narrative of women's empowerment is often co-opted, twisted into a political strategy, rather than a lived reality. We are told we are strong, resilient, the pillars of society. Yet, when we demand a seat at the table where decisions are made, when we ask for our fair share of resources and opportunities, we are met with resistance, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt. The very term empowerment implies that power is something to be given, a gift bestowed from on high. True empowerment, however, comes from within, from recognizing our inherent worth and agency, and from creating systems where that agency can flourish without hindrance. It is disheartening to see statistics like those from the WPP Africa Barometer 2024 showing only a slight increase in women's parliamentary representation, from 24% to 25%. While countries like Rwanda, with over 60% women in legislative seats, offer a beacon of what is possible, they remain exceptions rather than the rule. The sub-Saharan African average of 27% women in national parliaments, as per 2025 UN Women data, is far from parity. The real work of empowerment involves dismantling barriers like party gatekeeping, financial constraints, and deep-seated cultural biases, not just paying lip service during election cycles. The mirage of progress shimmers, but the oasis remains distant. Beyond the empty promises, there lies a more sinister reality for those who dare to demand true accountability and justice. Patriots, men and women who speak truth to power, who advocate for genuine democracy and human rights, often find themselves targeted. They are labeled troublemakers, dissidents, even enemies of the state. Their voices, which should be amplified in any healthy democracy, are systematically silenced through intimidation, harassment, and sometimes far worse. This culture of fear permeates society, discouraging others from speaking out, from questioning the status quo, from demanding the change our continent so desperately needs. True democracy is more than just holding periodic elections. It is about fostering an environment where dissent is not only tolerated but valued, where freedom of speech and assembly are sacrosanct, and where the rule of law applies equally to everyone, regardless of their political connections. Yet, in many of our nations, these fundamental tenets are subverted. Opposition parties are weakened, civil society organizations are constrained, and the media is often muzzled or co-opted. This creates an illusion of stability, but it is a fragile peace built on the suppression of legitimate grievances and aspirations. The persecution of those who stand for integrity corrodes the very soul of our nations. The youth, who represent the majority of Africa's population, are particularly affected by this climate of repression. They are brimming with ideas, energy, and a desire to build a better future. Yet their participation in formal political processes is shockingly low, with young people holding only 2.2% of parliamentary seats, and young women less than 1%, as highlighted by International IDEA. When young people see that speaking out can lead to dire consequences, when they see that the paths to political participation are blocked by entrenched interests, they become disillusioned. Their potential, which is Africa's greatest asset, is stifled before it can even blossom. It is time, therefore, for the women and youth of Africa to rise. We can no longer afford to be passive observers of our own destiny. We must reclaim our voices, individually and collectively. We must organize, educate ourselves, and support one another. The power of the ballot, though often undermined, is still a potent tool. We must vote with our conscience, for leaders who demonstrate integrity, vision, and a genuine commitment to serving the people, not themselves. And more than just voting, we must dare to run for office, to infiltrate these male-dominated spaces and transform them from within. Africa is a continent of immense wealth, not just in its vast natural resources, but in the talent, resilience, and ingenuity of its people. We have the capacity for self-sufficiency, for prosperity, for creating societies where every citizen can thrive. The narrative of an Africa dependent on external aid, an Africa perpetually plagued by conflict and poverty, is one that has been imposed upon us, and one that we must vehemently reject. Our destiny lies in our own hands, and it begins with empowering our communities from the grassroots up, ensuring that local voices shape local solutions. The path to this reclaimed destiny, I firmly believe, will be paved by the women and youth of this continent. We bring different perspectives, different priorities, and a different kind of leadership. One that is often more collaborative, inclusive, and focused on long-term well-being rather than short-term political gains. Studies have shown the tangible benefits of women's leadership. More investment in essential services like drinking water projects, as seen in India, and better childcare coverage, as observed in Norway. Imagine the transformative potential if African women were truly represented at all levels of decision-making. To the men who currently hold the reins of power in Africa, I say this with respect, but also with an unwavering conviction. Your time to exclusively dictate the course of our nations is over. You have had decades, generations even, to deliver on the promises of independence. While some progress has been made, the systemic inequalities, the pervasive corruption, and the unrealized potential of our people speak volumes. It is time to step aside, not in abdication, but in partnership. It is time to create genuine space for women and youth to lead, to innovate, and to govern. Let us build a future where integrity is not a rare commodity, but the expected standard for leadership. Let us foster a political culture where service to the people is the highest calling. Let us ensure that the upcoming super election year of 2024 and beyond, and the significant anniversaries like the 30th of the Beijing Declaration, mark a true turning point. The theme for International Women's Day 2025 for all women and girls, rights, equality, empowerment must be more than a slogan. It must be our collective mission. A new Africa is possible. An Africa led by its daughters and its youth, an Africa that finally fulfills its magnificent promise. The time for that change is now.